Hi there folks, it's book list time. I've got a long book list for you. So make yourselves a nice hot drink and settle down for my spring book list. And this year, because the news has not been great over the last couple of months, things seem to be very gloomy for most of us, and I thought that a lot of us needed a little bit of a cheering up, and so I decided that my spring book list would be an uplifting list of books to read in spring, while you can also watch all the spring flowers coming out and enjoy the sunshine, which is always uplifting. Of course, for those of you on the other side of the world, it's a little bit the other way around. But I hope these books will lift you up as you go into the winter months as well. Now, I have devised quite a long list for this book list. I've not only included novels, but I've also included a few biographies and a couple of non-fiction books. And not only that, in my last video, I asked some of my subscribers to put forward their own suggestions for uplifting books, to give everybody a really good long list of books that can keep us going through some of the dark days that we might be experiencing. And my dear subscribers have come up with the goods. So I've got a bit of a list at the end as well that they have sent in. So thank you very, very much if you have put forward your suggestions. So there we go. It's going to be a long one, so get settled in, and we'll make a start in a couple of minutes. Now, of course, we can't do a book list without some Tilly time as well. And she is in one of her favourite places at the bottom of the stairs, because, of course, she's waiting for the postman. And I think she likes to think that she's guarding me as well. So, doing your job as my little watchdog. So I have to put a gate across so that she doesn't bite the postman's hands. But apart from that, she likes to feel that she's being useful, don't you, pup? Eh? Yeah, that's it. All right then, that's Tilly time for now. All right, we'll see you later. Now, some of these books I have mentioned before. There's a few that I haven't mentioned before. And there are a few that I probably like to mention that also would be uplifting, but I've talked about quite a lot. So don't worry if I haven't mentioned some of the usual things. And also there is a video I did not last January, but the January before, where I did some uplifting books then too. I'll give a link to that video towards the end of this one, because there's a few in there that I'm not mentioning in this video. So you should end up with a really good list of books to maybe make you feel a little bit more positive in these difficult times. Now, as usual with the novels, I will be listing them in chronological order of publication. So, to that end, I'm starting with a classic. It was published in 1749, and it's Tom Jones by Henry Fielding. Why have I included this in a list of uplifting books? Although it has got an underlying seriousness, it's also a little bit of a romp through English countryside, society, morals, and it's humorous. it has its light-hearted side while making, as a lot of 18th century novels did, while making quite serious comments on society of the time. But it is good fun. I read this book when I did my Open University degree, in which I focused on literature and history. I did a whole year on the 18th century, on the Enlightenment period, where there were sort of new developments in science, in philosophy, architecture. We had those wonderful, elegant country houses, the landscape gardening of people like Lancelot Brown. And you get this whole feel of that period in this book. The premise on the back of this edition says, for most readers, this is one of the great comic novels in the English language, a vivid Hogarthian panorama of 18th century life, with a plot which Coleridge described as one of the 3 most perfect ever planned. To give it its full title, The History of Tom Jones, a Foundling, starts out with Tom Jones as a baby who is left as a foundling at the house of very rich Squire Allworthy and his sister Bridget, and he's brought up by them. But it's not just about the rich folk. This Tom Jones himself makes friends with the much poorer folk, and he does chase a few women as well. As he grows up, he feels more at home with people like the servants and the gamekeeper. So we get to see both worlds, the rich world of that period and the much poorer working class world. So it's a very, very rich book. So if you enjoy classics, if you want to read more 18th century works and get lost in this wonderful period of English history, then I think this is a really good recommendation for you. Now, I think one of the books that a lot of people would suggest for my next book would be a book that I have talked about quite a lot before, and it's Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. But as I've talked about that quite a bit, and it is a really lovely one, it is a very uplifting book, but I wanted to look at something a little bit different and from a similar period. And I've got these 2 really lovely old books. This was first published in 1872, so it's about the same period as Little Women. And it's What Katy Did by Susan Coolidge, and also this lovely What Katy Did Next. Now, I inherited these. It must have been from my grandmother, because these editions are really old, and the inscription in this one, somebody's written in the front and dated it 1914. So this was that's 10 years before my mother was born. So these I must have inherited from my grandmother, and they're very precious to me. I absolutely loved the What Katy Did books when I was a child. I read them several times. And it starts out where Katy is a 12-year-old and she's always getting into trouble, getting into scrapes. And then one day she has a terrible accident and she has to spend a long time sort of bedridden. And that experience kind of changes her a lot. And then she goes to school, and there's all her experiences there, etc. And I just loved them. I mean, of course, they're very dated, but they're just lovely books if you want a bit of escapism and into the lovely kind of morals of just being kind and honest and compassionate to other people. They are just lovely, warm-hearted books, and I think sort of lift anybody's heart. So I think while most people have probably read Little Women, probably not quite so many people have read the What Katy Did book. So this is why I am recommending these for an uplifting read at the moment. And isn't that just a lovely cover? It's very much in the Art Nouveau style of that period. Just gorgeous. Not terribly good condition, but it's just such a lovely book. My next book, published in 1908, is another children's classic, but definitely well worth reading as an adult, and it's The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I have searched high and low for my copy. I am sure I still have it somewhere. I really hope I haven't lost it or lent it to someone and not got it back, because it had the illustrations by Arthur Rackham, my favourite illustrator, and I just cannot put my hand on it anywhere. I hope one day I'll find it again. And it was a gift from my aunt, my mother's sister, when I was a child, and I absolutely loved it. The story of Ratty and Mole and Badger, and the way they tried to help their friend Mr. Toad in all in all his misdeeds and adventures. For me, my favourite bits were the kind of more dark and eerie and kind of maybe more spiritual parts of the book, rather than what tends to be the more popularised sort of chapters with Toad and towards the end with the battle with the weasels. My favourite chapters in the book are the one where Mole gets lost in the dark woods and is rescued by the kindly Mr. Badger. And the other favourite of the whole book is the chapter entitled The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. There's something so incredibly spiritual and beautiful and lovely about that chapter, and I think it's just, I think when you read it as an adult, you probably appreciate more the beautiful prose in Kenneth Grahame's work. So if you haven't read it as an adult, then I really highly recommend you go back and do that again and just really enjoy the beautiful prose. Now, I think another really great way of lifting the spirits and getting into a bit of escapism for a while is to read something hilariously funny. And you can't go very wrong with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I have 3 of the books. I've got The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe and Everything, and So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. I don't have the first one, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think I borrowed it. I really, when I come across a copy of that, I'm going to buy it, because I really would like to have the full set. And there's the last one as well, which is called Mostly Harmless, and I don't think I've actually read that one. So again, that's another one I really want to be looking out for. The first one was published in 1987. It had already been a radio play, a radio series, before it was published as a novel. The radio sitcom ran between 1978 and 1980, so very early on. The main character, Arthur Dent, was incidentally played by Simon Jones, who was a great friend of my family later on in the 80s and 90s, and he played the same part in the television series as well. He worked with my father at one point, and we knew him quite well until he emigrated to America. I just absolutely love the Hitchhikers series. Of course, for those of you who don't know, Arthur Dent is a stereotypical, shall we say, Englishman who is, around the opening of the book, very annoyed because the council are planning to run a road through his house, and they want to demolish his house, and he's very, very up in arms about this. His best friend is a person called Ford Prefect, who, unknown to Arthur, is actually an alien. He's kind of sort of been looking after him. And at the opening of the book, we discovered that an alien spaceship is about to destroy Earth in order to make way for hyperspace bypass. So it kind of reflects Arthur's problems on Earth, but a little bit bigger. And Ford Prefect kind of rescues Arthur and takes him onto his own spaceship, much to Arthur's surprise, let's say. And they go on to have adventures, both in time and space. It's just so well conceived, so imaginative, very, very funny. So if you've never read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I really seriously recommend it if you need a few laughs at the moment. Come on then. Hey! Well, will you look at that? Tilly has come to join us. I think she's given up on the postman. I don't think the postman's visiting us today. No, that's always a disappointment, isn't it? One day we'll have to talk about books with dogs in, won't we? Eh? We'll see what we can find. So, now then, my next book. Are you going again? All right then, bye-bye. My next book is, this is one I haven't talked about before. And to be honest, although I know I've read this, I couldn't remember much about it. But so I was looking on... I was looking for sort of inspiration on a list of uplifting books, and this book was recommended by the writer David Nichols, who wrote One Day, and I thought, oh, yes, I've read that. It was published in 1982 and it's called At Freddie's, and it's by Penelope Fitzgerald. Freddie's in the title is the name of a stage school. The stage school is actually, its official name is the Temple Stage School, but the proprietress is called Freddie, described as a formidable woman of unknown age and provenance. But everybody who is anybody claims to know her. By sheer force of character and single-minded thrust, she has turned herself into a national institution. It's set in the 1960s. And it's just a story about the happenings at this stage school, about the children who go there and their little sort of, their ambitions and their jealousies and their adventures when they go out to be in a show. And it's funny that I don't know why it hasn't kind of stayed with me so much, but when I look back at it, I think, yes, this is very funny. It's quite subtly funny. It's as somebody in the listener said, occasionally one picks up a book and knows by the bottom of page 1 that nothing but pleasure lies ahead. At Freddie's falls into that category. In 3 lines and a snatch of dialogue, Penelope Fitzgerald can nail a character. In a paragraph, conjure up a place and an atmosphere. So, despite the fact that I have not been able to remember much about this book, I don't know, maybe I read it too quickly or wasn't in the mood or something, feel I need to go back and visit it again. I mean, here's it, you know, the opening paragraph gives you an idea of its feel. It must have been 1963 because the musical of Dombey and Son was running at the Alexandra. And it must have been the autumn because it was surely sometime in October that a performance was seriously delayed because 2 of the cast had slipped and hurt themselves in B dressing room corridor. And the reason for that was that the floor appeared to be flooded with something sticky and glutinous. The flood had been initiated by one of the younger boys in the chorus. He had discovered a way to interfere with the mechanism of the B corridor coffee machine so that it failed to respond to the next 50 sixpences put into it. The defect was reported, but the responsibility for it was argued between the safety manager and catering. When the next coin was put in, the machine produced, with a terrible pang, 51 plastic cups and then heaved and outpoured its load of milky fluid. So I think that gives you sort of an idea of the feel of the book. If that sounds like something fun that you might be interested in, the kind of adventures that happen in a children's stage school in London, I think that you would really enjoy this. Freddie's supplied the West End theatres with children for roles in everything from Shakespeare to pantomime. So there you go, At Freddie's by Penelope Fitzgerald. Now, I think I have talked about this book before, and I thought I've got to include it in this list because it's just great fun. Published in 1996. It's Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding. No relation, by the way, to Henry Fielding, who wrote Tom Jones. I've checked. I first knew about Bridget Jones' Diary when I went to see the film. And I think probably like many of us women, when I went to see the film, I was just turned 40, I think. And I think like many of us who went to see that film or read the book around that time, we saw ourselves. I remember sitting in the film thinking, that's my life. And it just so cleverly puts together the sort of hopes and dreams of a single woman battling with weight problems and trying to give up smoking, trying to find love, and failing miserably. And it's, of course, the book came out obviously before the film and is of course in diary form. So you see it's a whole year right through from January right through to December. It's very, very loosely based on Pride and Prejudice. Another good one for this list, but I'm not talking about that one today. Again, I've talked about it so often. But this is loosely based on Pride and Prejudice. As so many books are, actually, that thing of the person that you think you dislike being the one that you actually end up with. So in this, of course, there are two main men in Bridget Jones' life. And of course, there's the Daniel Cleaver, the more dangerous but more attractive man that she has a relationship with. But the other guy, Mark Darcy, no coincidence, I think, that she names him Darcy, the same name as the character in Pride and Prejudice, is the one that she can't stand at the beginning. But he ends up being a serious rival. It's great fun. It's just great fun, pure escapism. I think so funny because of many of us see ourselves in Bridget Jones in our 20s, 30s, 40s. And of course, there have been all the sequels. I'm still looking forward to watching the latest film. Yeah, chick lit at its best. I don't read a lot of chick lit, but I think, you know, when chick lit is good, it's really, really good. So there you go, Bridget Jones' Diary. My last one on my list of novels is published in 1998, and it's About a Boy by Nick Hornby, and I read it earlier this year, but I've seen that I saw the film also with Hugh Grant, of course, when it first came out. Absolutely loved it. And of course, it's called About a Boy. It's about the relationship between the so-called grown-up Will and the 12-year-old boy called Marcus. But who is the boy and who is the grown-up? Because Will is 36, but he's a very, very kind of childish, boyish grown up, concerned mainly with looking cool and tricking women into going out with him, whereas Marcus is awkward at school, and a little bit strange and weird, looks after his mother, is kind of probably much more grown up than Will actually is. So these two meet and form this sort of strange relationship, and they kind of help each other along the way. It's it's not only very, very funny, but it's very heartwarming. It's a great read. If you've seen the film but not read the book, the film kept very, very close to the book, I found. Extraordinary. It doesn't always happen, but the film is very, very close until the very end. The whole of the ending is completely different in the book. And apparently, I read somewhere that it was Hugh Grant's idea to have the ending that we see in the film, which works much better cinematically than the ending in the book. So I think that was actually a very good idea. It's funny and heartwarming. And of course, you probably know that the film was made by the same makers as Bridget Jones' Diary. So I equally recommend both the books and the films, both these books. Now, I'm going to look at some biographical works now. I do think that biographies can be incredibly uplifting, especially when you read about people who have gone through difficult times and brought themselves out of those and overcome obstacles and have really turned their lives around. There's a couple of those in this list, but the other two are just great fun. So I've got 4 biographical works for you right now. This first one, you will know this name if you are British. You may not know this person if you're anywhere else in the world, but he was a national treasure in this country. So forgive me if you don't know who this person is, but he was just such a loved person that I have to mention this autobiography by none other than Terry Wogan, and it's called Is It Me? For those of you who don't know Terry Wogan, he was a very, very well-known radio broadcaster on the BBC. He worked with Radio 2 for years and years. A very, very funny Irishman. And he just had a way of saying things that would just make you chuckle. This autobiography obviously takes you right through from his childhood in Limerick in Ireland, right through to his early career as a bank clerk, and then how he got to join the BBC and then become this famous broadcaster, and all the people he's met, and he also was had a chat show on television for a while, so he met lots and lots of people. But I remember him mostly as presenting the Radio 2 breakfast show, and at that time, this was in the late 90s and early 2000s, when I was working at a college as a lecturer. I wasn't going through a particularly happy time. The job was stressful. I had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, which I've had kind of on and off over 20 years now. Much better now, but it's never quite left me. Those mornings, getting up and then travelling to work every morning Terry Wogan kept me company and had me laughing out loud in the car as I drove to work, preparing for yet another awful day. And, you know, he just brightened up my day. Such a lovely man. A very, I mean, although he was really, really funny and could be extremely sarcastic about certain things, he also had a heart of gold. He was such a warm person. And this really came out from his broadcast. And the day he left Radio 2, he did this big speech. I remember sitting on my bed that morning, crying my eyes out that he was leaving, honestly. And sadly, he died a few years later. But I just loved reading this book about his life, which was published in 2000. If you've never heard of Terry Wogan, I don't know how well known he is outside of the UK, but if you can get hold of a copy of this autobiography, then do have a look. And for those of you in the UK that listened to him, watched him, then I also recommend that you have a look at his autobiography. Now, I think most people will know this next person. It's Michael Palin. And this particular book are his diaries from 1969 to 1979. And he's called this section The Python Years, for of course, Michael Palin was one of the great team that made up the Monty Python. And I know that many people in America really loved Monty Python. When Monty Python's Flying Circus was on television, my brother and I were in our late teens, and I remember I think it was every Thursday night, really looking forward to coming home and watching Monty Python on the television and laughing our heads off. It was very, very groundbreaking comedy, very irreverent, very silly, and just that sort of nonsensical humour that just many of us of that period just absolutely loved. Now, and this book was published in 2006, and it's actually Michael Palin's diaries from that period. So it's a real insight on things that happened during the period that they were filming Monty Python. So I think, you know, if you're looking for a bit of escapism, going back and into that time, and if you loved Monty Python and you want to see a little bit of the sort of what was happening realistically behind the scenes at that time, the relationships between the cast and everything like that, I think you'd really love this. And of course, Michael Palin has had a great career since Monty Python 2 with his very, very popular travel series and lots of other shows that he's been in. He's such a lovely man. My mother wrote to him once, I can't remember why, and he wrote back. It was amazing, you know. Such a nice man, such a kind man. So, yes, he talks a lot about the filming of Python and all the different people he's met. There's one where he meets Stephen Fry. It's just a fascinating insight. So if you loved Monty Python, then I think this is a great read for you. And it's, you know, it's a big read. And there are others, you know. He's had such a prolific career, obviously, lots and lots of comedy shows as well as Monty Python, his travel shows, and also he has written, he's been in several films, and he's also written quite a few books, mostly the travel books based on his TV travel show. So it's Around the World in 80 Days, Pole to Pole, etc. And the diaries, there's this one, and there's also the diaries from 1980 to 1988, Halfway to Hollywood, and then Travelling to Work, and then There and Back. So there are other diaries published as well, but these from the Python years, I think, you know, appeal to most people who loved Monty Python. So there you go. Now, next, it's another British national treasure here, one of my favourite people in the media, and he's written 3 autobiographical works. And this man is Stephen Fry, and we've got his first autobiography, Moab is My Washpot. This one, The Fry Chronicles, that's an autobiography. That was, Moab was 1997. This one was 2010. And then there's a later one called More Fool Me, which is a memoir published in 2014. Stephen Fry is he's one of those all-rounders. He just seems to do everything, and he's very good at it. He's also written other books, including this one, Heroes, a retelling of some of the Greek myths. And there are other things he's written that I really want to have a look at. The Liar, The Hippopotamus, Making History, etc. I don't know. Again, I'm not absolutely sure how well known he is outside of the UK. He first came to popularity, if you like, in early 90s. He was in a comedy double act with Hugh Laurie, which was called A Bit of Fry and Laurie, which was very, very funny. I remember watching that, absolutely loving it. And of course, Hugh Laurie, his great friend, went on to, he'd not only done lots of comedy, but went on to play House in the wonderful American series, and, you know, turned out to be a really, really good actor. But Stephen Fry, also a really good actor. Stephen Fry went on to play Jeeves in Jeeves and Wooster, and of course he was also in the wonderful Blackadder series with Rowan Atkinson. But as well as the comedy and the acting, he's one of those people that just seems to pop up everywhere as a presenter, a writer. He used to present a wonderful series on television called QI. He played the part of Oscar Wilde in a film about Oscar Wilde. And he has presented lots of documentaries. He did a travel series in America called Stephen Fry in America, which was really good. I watched that. God, he has done so much. It's just incredible. One of those people that just seems to go on and on. He is a great commentator on various things in society. He will talk about politics, about technology. He is one of those people who is just ultra intelligent, highly, highly intelligent and knowledgeable, and really well educated. But when you read his autobiographies, you realise that he has had his demons. You know, he didn't just spring out, you know, being the Stephen Fry that we all know and love. He had difficulties in his early years. And, you know, he's had mental health problems that he has talked about openly. He's just an extraordinary person. So I would recommend, if you don't know much about Stephen Fry, then I'd recommend looking into him and seeing what he has to say about various things. He's an extraordinarily erudite speaker. And I think reading his autobiographies, you know, again, it's fun because of, you know, all the comedy people he's worked with. Of course, as I say, Hugh Laurie, but he's worked with Emma Thompson, Rowan Atkinson, of course, lots and lots of people in the comedy world. So I think for anyone needing a bit of an uplift, I think Stephen Fry is a great place to go. And this is just an insight into his character. This is what he says on the back of this book. I am English, tweedy, pucker, confident, establishment, self-assured, in charge. That is how people like to see me. But the truth, never so at variance. In fact, I am chronically overmastered by a sense of failure, underachievement, and a terrible knowledge that I have betrayed, abused, or neglected the talents that nature bestowed upon me. Are you not prey to all those things too? I do hope so. I am surely describing nothing more than the fears, dreads, and neuroses we all share. No? More or less? Mutatis mutandis? All things being equal? Oh, please say yes. So that is Stephen Fry, and I do hope you'll have a look at this one. And the last of my list of biographical works is Me by Elton John. And I've included this because I think for anyone that's gone through any kind of struggle in their life, in their mental health, or with drugs, with alcohol, or anything like that, I think this is a great book to read, because we all know, despite Elton John's great success in the 70s and 80s, he had a terrible, terrible struggle with drugs. And this autobiography really gives you an insight into those years and the struggles with his mental health, the difficulties that fame, that absolute total fame brings to a person, and how he managed, with the help of his friends, to overcome his addictions and become the person he is today, with a wonderful partner and his children. It's just incredibly inspiring. And of course, apart from that, I'm a huge Elton John fan for his music from the 1970s, when I first saw him on Top of the Pops with Your Song. I have always been a huge fan of his music. I always thought he's a complete genius. I remember in the 70s listening to the Yellow Brick Road album over and over and over again, on vinyl, of course, on my dad's record player. I almost still remember all the lyrics from those songs. So it's like, there's something about his music, his voice, that just grabs me. And I think his whole story of his rise to fame, and it wasn't an easy one either. You know, the early years were quite difficult, but then that huge rise to fame, and then the struggle with the addiction and all that is just, to overcome that is a huge thing. You know, one cannot trivialize it. So I think that's why I've chosen this book, because for anyone going through difficult times, I think it's a book where you can gain a lot of hope from it. And of course, the film they made of his life too, Rocket Man, Taron Egerton playing Elton John and Jamie Bell playing Bernie Taupin, was also really, really good. I do highly recommend this autobiography. Now, for the non-fiction section, I have included a couple of books that I think belonged to my father in the 1960s, and they are books by the comedian Spike Milligan. The Bedside Milligan, or Read Your Way to Insomnia, and A Dustbin of Milligan. This one was first published in 1961, and this one in 1969, so much later. I don't know, again, I'm going to say, I don't know how well known Spike Milligan is outside of the UK, but he was very, very well known comedian in the 1960s and 70s. He was one of the members of the Goons, who were very, very famous for a comedy radio show in the 1950s, before I was born. But I think my parents were great fans of the Goon show. And this was alongside Harry Seacombe and Peter Sellers. Milligan's humour is very nonsensical, and I must say it's probably nowadays maybe a little bit dated. These books are just kind of little verses, they're little stories, they're kind of silly. So if you like that kind of humour, then maybe something like this is kind of right for this list. Let me just give you an idea. Story called Fretwork, The Shame of Our Cities. Hercules, Fred Blaireaut, snuggled down in his favourite chair. He was a tall man, as you, dear reader, will notice when he stands up. Hercules puffed casually on his cherrywood samovar. A wisp of smoke escaped from the bowl. He immediately inserted a fresh wisp. Lazily he drew on his pipe. He drew on the wall, the ceiling, the soles of his boots. Was there no end to this man's ability? Etc. So just an example of the kind of humour, sort of silly nonsense humour, and that was very much part of the Goons' humour. Maybe some people of my age or older will still very much appreciate the humour of Spike Milligan. For me, I just find it just a little bit too silly. I probably really, really loved it when I was a child. Now I prefer sort of slightly more witty, clever humour. But I think for anyone, I mean, he wrote a few little books. He suffered a lot from with mental health problems too. He was an interesting man. But yeah, I think for anyone kind of my age and upwards, maybe having a look back at some of Spike Milligan's humour could be a nice little uplifting bit of humour and silliness to lighten up your day. And just two more non-fiction books, this time more in the line of might call self-help, personal development. And this is one of my favourite of this sort of book, and I've mentioned it before. It's Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I read this book a few years ago and I absolutely love Eckhart Tolle. I watch him a lot on YouTube. In fact, every morning, just to start the day with, I will look up sometimes it's Eckhart Tolle, sometimes it's somebody else who does sort of enlightening videos. The Power of Now is such an important book, I think, especially in these times, and can really help you deal with coping with today's difficulties. It's about remaining present. It's about realising that we only ever have this moment in time. There is no past, there is no future. Everything that we regret about the past or we worry about the future is all just thought. It's not actually real. We only have this moment. It's such a powerful thing. When you start to live like that, it's just amazingly powerful. And I just, use what I've read in this book to remind myself of that every day. Of course, we can't help sometimes slipping back into those feelings of fear and what will happen, etc. But books like this really help you. And of course, I have a routine of yoga and meditation every morning as well. It really helps to bring yourself into the present and remember just appreciating what is now in your present. It's difficult to describe the whole thing, so I do recommend reading this book and having a look at Eckhart Tolle on YouTube. And The Power of Now was published quite a while ago now, actually. 1999. So he's been around for a while. And another book that has really helped me for various reasons, and I'm talking about this book because I think it's for people who are highly sensitive, or as she calls them, empaths. It's by Judith. She's written a lot of books. Her name is Judith Orloff. This one is called Positive Energy. Now, the reason I have looked at her books, I've mentioned before, I've had chronic fatigue syndrome for over 20 years. And one of the things I've discovered, I've researched a lot about this condition, because I have also created courses and videos to help others with it too. One of the things I've discovered about it is that most people with chronic fatigue syndrome, and possibly people with lots of other chronic conditions, are often highly sensitive people. So both physically and emotionally highly sensitive to things that happen around us and in the world. Now, in times where things seem very chaotic in the world, in the news, people who are highly sensitive can be much more affected by that than lots of other people. High sensitivity has been scientifically proven that around 20% of people have this kind of high sensitivity gene, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, because people with high sensitivity are also highly compassionate and creative and lots of other lovely things. So it's a good thing to be, but it does leave us feeling vulnerable to outside influences, etc. So that's what I'm talking about, this book. For those of you who are just feeling overwhelmed by everything at the moment, and you feel you may be one of those highly sensitive people, I do recommend Judith Orloff's books. And this one, Positive Energy, it's 10 extraordinary prescriptions for transforming fatigue, stress, and fear into vibrance, strength, and love. So it's a very lots of discussions and explanations about, why you feel the way you feel, and then lots of exercises and strategies you can use to live day to day with energy and without stress and fear and exhaustion, etc. So she is great, and I thought that this would be a really good book for the moment, for anybody who's feeling very overwhelmed. This one was published in 2004. She's written lots and lots of other books on the similar subject, so have a look and see which one of hers would suit you best. In this last section, I'm going to briefly run over some of the books that have been suggested to me by my lovely subscribers. So, and the first one, and this came up a lot also when I googled uplifting books, and it's A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. It's a debut novel. Oh, I'd not come across this book before. It's published in 2013. So I'm just going to quickly read the premise from the Goodreads website. A grumpy yet lovable man finds his solitary world turned on its head when a boisterous young family moves in next door. Meet Ove. He's a curmudgeon, the kind of man who points at people he dislikes as if they were burglars caught outside his bedroom window. He has staunch principles, strict routines, and a short fuse. People call him the bitter neighbour from hell, but must Ove be bitter just because he doesn't walk around with a smile plastered to his face all the time? It's a kind of bittersweet comedy and very funny, but obviously also heartwarming, and people say it ends up being a real feel-good story. So there you go, A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. And two people recommended The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. Sounds like a really good one for spring as well. Again, I haven't heard of this one before. A Recipe for Happiness. 4 women, 1 medieval Italian castle, plenty of wisteria and solitude as needed. The women at the centre of The Enchanted April are alike only in their dissatisfaction with their everyday lives. They find each other and the castle of their dreams through a classified ad in a London newspaper one rainy February afternoon. The ladies expect a pleasant holiday, but they don't anticipate that the month they spend in Portofino will reintroduce them to their true natures and reacquaint them with joy. Now, if the same transformation can be worked on their husbands and lovers, the enchantment will be complete. That sounds like a lot of fun, and I can see from the premise that that certainly sounds like a fun and uplifting novel. So, and another one I've not heard of before that has been recommended, and I've also seen come up on Google searches, is The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson. Interesting title. Published in 2009. After a long and eventful life, Alan Carson ends up in a nursing home, believing it to be his last stop. The only problem is that he's still in good health. A big celebration is in the works for his 100th birthday, but Alan really isn't interested, and he'd like a bit more control over his alcohol consumption, so he decides to escape. He climbs out the window in his slippers and embarks on a hilarious and entirely unexpected journey. It would be the adventure of a lifetime for anyone else, but Alan has a larger-than-life backstory. He has not only witnessed some of the most important events of the 20th century, but actually played a key role in them. Quirky and utterly unique. I like quirky and unique. So that one sounds like one that I would definitely like to look out for. And sounds like a really good, fun read. But yeah, I have to say, it does have mixed reviews on Goodreads. Some people love it, some people hate it. So, you know, sounds fun to me anyway. Now, just quickly go over a few other writers that people have suggested. Gervais Finn, the Little Village School books, obviously a book series. Ben Avanovich and his River of London series. And books by, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Regular Isewin. It's spelled Ysewijin. So forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right. She has written books about food and the history of food, including titles such as Pride and Pudding, the history of British puddings, savoury and sweet. That sounds great. Apparently these books are just lovely books to read and get amazing recreated recipes from historical cookery books. So that sounds like a lot of fun. Somebody also recommended Amy Tan and the Backyard Bird Chronicles, a gorgeous witty account of birding, nature and the beauty around us that hides in plain sight. I love the sound of that. one of my favourite things, by the way, is the sound of bird song. And I love birds. So that sounds great. Just a few more things that I should probably... Oh, yes, somebody else recommended Sharon K. Penman, The 5-Minute Gardener and the 4 Agreements. And, and somebody else recommended Don Quixote. A few more things I've seen on television, but where I haven't actually read the book. So I know the story, but I haven't read the book. I just want to mention these 3 things. The Secret Garden, of course, by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Lovely, uplifting story. Anne of Green Gables, of course, by L.M. Montgomery. It was a wonderful television serial recently of Anne of Green Gables, which was really lovely. Again, yeah, very positive and uplifting. One other thing they made a television film of was The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. It's just such a lovely story, an uplifting story about love and friendship, and it's just gorgeous. So I would recommend either the book or that television film, basically for children, but it's a lovely story for anybody. So there we are. That is my spring list of uplifting books. There are so many more I could have mentioned, but honestly, this one could have gone on forever. You know, there's all kinds of things. There's Winnie the Pooh, there's The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, there's The Hobbit, lots and lots of other books and comedy books, etc. But I hope you've enjoyed this list, and I really hope that you find 1 or 2 things in this list that you can dive into and escape for a while from whatever is going on, whether it's global issues or personal issues or whatever. I also, I think I did a kind of similar list, not quite as long as this one, January 2024. I'll put a link to that up here for you if you want to see a few more uplifting books. So that's it for now. So next week I should be doing a book review, and I'll be reviewing the book I'm reading at the moment, which is Shadow Play by Joseph O'Connor, which I'm really enjoying. And I think after that, it's probably going to be, I think it's around time I did another A to Z of authors in a couple of weeks. So that's coming up too. So lots to look forward to. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As usual, please let me have your comments. I love hearing from you. And, you know, do give any more suggestions you want about books and all kinds of books and things that help you get through difficult times. And of course, our pets also are very good for helping us in times of overwhelm and stress, aren't they? Yes, they are. Yeah, that's it. So, what are you asking for now, hey? What are you expecting now? She's always expecting something. So enjoy seeing spring develop. And I must say, around here, all the daffodils, snowdrops and crocuses are out, and the sun has been shining the last few days, so it does really feel like spring is arriving soon. So all the best to everyone out there. Let's hope for better times ahead. So from me and Tilly, goodbye until next week. See you soon. Bye for now.